for her very first production as Joe Papp's casting director at the Public Theater, she paired some young Yale grad named Meryl Streep with some unknown named Mandy Patinkin. She cast Raul Julia in Threepenny Opera, Denzel Washington as Richard III, and a child named Cynthia Nixon as Juliet. Welcome to Women in Theater. I'm Linda Weiner, theater critic of Newsday, and our guest is Rosemarie Tichler, who for 26 years saw the public through gender revolts, colorblind casting, and the earliest days of the culture wars.
Hello.
Hello. So, tell me, the Village Voice once had a headline that said that you had the job from hell. That's not true.
No, it wasn't. I loved my job.
Yeah.
I loved my job. It was crazy and it was hectic and it was stressful, but it was a great job. I loved Joe. I loved the artists I work with, so it was
totally
great.
amazing. Now, you were there for 26 years, and
Yes.
for the from 75 to 91, you were casting director.
Yes.
And then Joe died in 91, and then you were from 91 to 2001. You were something called artistic producer?
Yes.
And tell me what that is.
Well, you know, there was associate producers, and they usually get the money. The artistic producer puts the talent together, and that's what we put that title. George was producer, and
George Wolfe.
George Wolfe, sorry, was producer, and so I gave myself that title, and he loved it, and it was good because it described what I did. I chose the directors, I worked on the plays, and supervised the choosing of all the talent with it. So that was what an artistic producer does, rather than raise money.
Yeah. Oh, could you raise money?
No,
That's
couldn't.
really awful.
Couldn't.
Before we go to the Papp years, because when we're taping this, it's November of 2005, and this is really the 50th anniversary of the Public Theater, and I'd love to talk more about that time because you were really the second most powerful person at the Public, but invisible. You know, except to, of course, actors
Right.
who, you know, feared and loved you. So, but now, since 2001, you're teaching at...
I teach at the grad acting program at NYU.
And you teach acting and
I
teach
teach
casting.
audition technique.
Audition.
I teach them, these wonderful, talented young men and women, how to... what's expected of them and how to help them get jobs and what people want and to use themselves in a good way. So I love that. I was teaching while I was at the Public too.
I mean, and who would know it better than you from those years?
I think I'm helpful.
Yeah.
I think I'm helpful. I also do workshops at Juilliard and Yale and Columbia and some of the other schools. I love it, teaching. So.
And you're working on a book?
I'm working on a book of interviews with 16 major actors in this country.
And were these actors that you had?
They are some so far, and they're actors that I know and worked with. And I mean, they're mainly theater-based actors. They're actors who work in all media, but who still have a connection and a love and come back to the theater, not movie stars.
Now, you did not begin as somebody who wanted to be a casting director.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
I'm not sure. I mean,
well, I always loved the theater, and I just never knew what I could do in it. So I worked in publishing, and I got a master's in dramatic literature, and then
Okay, you went to Barnard and you went to Berkeley. All right.
Yes. And then there was an opening at Theater Communications Group, which is still alive and well, and then it was mainly a casting service, and I just thought, this sounds interesting, and I went to work as a receptionist.
Yeah, you were
for
answering
about
phones there?
85 a week.
Yeah, very nice with a master's degree, thank you.
And then, that's what you do in theater. It's always, you pay. And then I did that, and then I realized there was a casting office that I'd like that. And so I figured I'd better study acting, because I thought I should know the process rather than just make these decisions and not know what I was talking about. So I studied with someone, Rose Schulman, who was a very old woman at that time, worked at the Hedgerow Theater with O'Neill. And I took a class every Sunday for about 2 years. So I learned about how they do it. So that was good. And then I rose and I became a casting director, and then I was head of casting, and then
one day you walked into Joe's office?
I walked into Joe's office, yeah. I was going to leave and freelance, you know. and I'd be a wealthy woman today if I did. But he called.
Advice to youngsters.
Advice to young casting
Yes,
directors.
yes, freelance.
But he called, and it was my favorite theater. I mean, I loved the work, so I couldn't resist. So I went down and met him.
What you loved is the politics?
What I loved is the politics, mainly. I loved the politics. I loved the kind of work he was doing, you know, this was in '74, and this was during the Vietnam War. I mean, he was the only theater talking about issues, and besides the casting of people of color, just automatically, no big deal. It was natural, was to cast people of color, and he was the only one doing that. So of course, all that I loved, and I went down there, but I heard he was a bit of a, you know, bossy guy, and so I remember on my interview with him, I said to him, you know, I'd love to do this, but if you're going to like veto my thoughts and really just cast it by fiat, then I don't think it's good. I don't think we'd get along. I said very tentatively, and he said, oh, I wouldn't do that. And he didn't really. Every once in a while he did, but he didn't, and so he was great.
In the heyday of the public, in the most productive time with the 5 theaters and the park, the Central Park, and for a while Lincoln Center.
Yes,
yes.
I came when Chorus Line was in rehearsal, and that was the heyday. I mean, when Chorus Line opened, it opened up, it was a major hit, ran for years, and it opened the coffers, and it gave money, which Joe put right back into the theater, into programs.
He did something adorable, like playwrights on staff, or some payroll for playwrights, and just put the money back in so the playwrights could actually get benefits.
Yes, so he definitely gave playwrights salaries, you know, so there was some stability in their lives. And he started a Latino program, and he started a poetry program and a film program. The place became a cultural center.
So how many productions do you think you would cast in a typical year then?
And there was a staff of 2 casting directors with me and 2 casting assistants. I mean, we were like a factory. We cast about 10 to 12 productions a year, and the park, which was 2. So it could be anywhere from 10 to 14.
Wow.
And it was, you know, so that's why then they say the job from hell, I think, because it was like nonstop. But it was exciting. It was exciting.
And the power. Really, was it daunting? I mean, is it daunting? The idea that you really can change people's lives one way or the other?
You know, I took it seriously. I realized it was a great responsibility, a job with a great responsibility, and I just was very aware of not misusing that trust. So, but I realized that my taste meant, you know, was very important and was going to show, because a casting director, you know, they don't necessarily cast it all, but they bring in the talent with whom then the director chooses and the producer chooses. So that's the, you know, the way in. I open the door and keep the door a certain amount open.
So tell me the process then.
Well, the process is you get Joe would call me and say, we're doing this play, and so-and-so's directing it, and you should call him and set up a meeting. And so we set up a meeting, and usually if the playwright was alive, it was a new play, we'd meet with the playwright. You meet with the playwright and the director, and you talk about, I've read the play, and my associates I work with had read the play, and we talk about the play. They talk about who they would love in their dreams to do it. Meryl Streep's name always came up.
Sorry to have mentioned her first.
But it's true. It was after that, you know, and then we hear what they're looking for. We give some ideas, and then we put down a breakdown to the agents all over the city. We make up lists. The casting office made up lists. We got lists from the agents, and then, you know, every director will talk to his doorman, who will say, "Oh, you should see this TV star." So we got lists, and then we start calling people and bringing them in and having them come in to audition. And that's really the process. And then that could be, you know, days, 4, 5, 6 hours a day for 10 days, more. You cast a lot of roles. Some roles are problems. Some people don't audition. I mean, people who have a body of work that they don't. So you make an offer to.
But you had open auditions also, where
Yes.
you would just let
You
people
have to
come
do
in and
that.
introduce themselves.
We had auditions when we weren't crazed. We had auditions about 5 or 6 times a year where anyone could come. 2 or 3 days we did that, and then in the park we also did that also. You know, the park was always separate. It was just for Shakespeare. So.
Now, this colorblind casting, or is it the same as non-traditional casting?
Yeah, it's the same name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the name that I think
Yeah.
describes the same thing.
Yeah. That this was quite revolutionary. I mean, not that long ago, I remember that it was shocking when Suzanne Farrell danced on stage with Arthur Mitchell at the New York City Ballet. That was a big deal. There was a white woman and a black guy and potted her. And by the time, you know, you and Joe made audiences accustomed to just seeing Tracey Ullman with Morgan Freeman in Taming of the Shrew, and there's no letters saying, what are you doing? Yeah?
No. Well, we haven't got the people that didn't like it were the critics, not you, but Mr. Simon. John Simon, who we didn't talk. I mean, I'd see him in elevators when he'd come by and we wouldn't talk. He wrote terrible things like, kings cannot be people of color. I mean, he really said that. But the people never minded. People just accepted it. You're a king, you're black, you're gray, you're orange, you're a king. You're married to this person, you're married to this person.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's your twin brother, and you're black.
And of course, what it does, as long as you can act it and convince you have the personal qualities to do it, and that's how we would think of it. We would think of they had the qualities and the ability to do it and the personal style of it, besides whether it was color or not. But it was important that the theater reflect the city of New York. That was very important for Joe. It's very important for me. When I go to a play now and I see more than like 10 or 15 people and there's not a person of color, it's like I get sick. I can't stand it. I hate it. So this was a very deep thing of his life, and it wasn't like he was a do-gooder or anything. He grew up.
Well, he also was.
He also was, but that wasn't the reason. He grew up in Brooklyn where there were Italians and Jews and black people, and that was what he knew, and he was part of his life. So I always say that's why he did it. It wasn't like, we're going to cast. We're going to be good in cast. So.
Yeah, you've said something about, it was not public theater was not just its name.
Yeah. No. Well, that's important that it was that everyone could have admission to it, and that everyone could see some reflection of themselves on the stage.
Diane Venora as Hamlet. Was that your idea?
No, it was his.
That was Joe's?
It was his, and I must say, I was very retrograde. I thought, can she really do it? But it was one of the best Hamlets I've ever seen, because she was a young boy. And you really do feel with Hamlet, well, I mean, get over it. I mean, your father and your mother remarried, and but she was a young boy, and you can see what that meant. She was beautiful. What it meant when, like a 15-year-old boy loses his father and then his mother remarries. It was very moving. It's a lovely Hamlet. Joe directed it. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Then, when I mentioned the beginnings of the culture war, of course, the culture wars have been going on forever. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
But I remember in 90 or 91, I think the year before he died, in 90, when he refused, the National Endowment for the Arts required all artists and institutions to sign a pledge saying that they wouldn't do anything obscene, and that he refused it, and therefore turned back $50,000, which for the institutional theaters at the, in the beginning of the death of public funding, was a big deal.
Very big deal. It was more than 50. I think he turned down 350.
Really?
Yeah. And it was also, it was the end of chorus line monies by then. So it was really a hardship. It wasn't that, well, we didn't need it. It was chorus line was closed in 90, and that big faucet was closed. And so he really needed it, but it was principle. I mean, he grew up in the 30s, and he grew, and he testified, he took the Fifth Amendment because he wouldn't name names from in the 50s and the McCarthy's era. So that was deep commitment.
Right around that time, there was a representative Republican from California who called him a artistic welfare queen, and
I never heard that one.
No, he said, well, it's funny, I've always thought about myself as a prince. So, that's so nice.
That's great.
What were the best picks? Do you look back and say, I found that one?
Well, you know, Meryl was someone who came to audition for me. Her agent, of course, she was graduating from Yale. She hadn't graduated yet, and that was the beginning of when I first got to the public. She hadn't graduated yet. She was graduating, and her agent, Milton Goldman, called me and said, I have someone that Bobby Lewis said is one of the most talented people he's ever taught. Will you see her? Of course. And I saw her. I still remember what she did.
What'd she do?
She did Queen Margaret in Richard, in Henry VI, and she did a Terrence McNally piece about a girl who remembers everyone, the car she was in, and every guy she slept with in high school. It was hysterical. It was very funny. And she did those too, which is extraordinary range, you know. And she did that, and then we were doing Trelawney of the Wells. So that's one person. Do you want to hear that? Should I tell you that?
Sure.
She was doing Trelawney, we were casting Trelawney of the Wells, and I thought, that seems right for the young entrepreneur producer. And I brought her in, and A.J. Antoon cast it, directed it, and he loved her. And I brought her back, and she had a call back then. Joe, the producer, always makes the final choice.
Did Joe and you have the same taste?
We did. We had similar tastes. You know, in the early days, I would have to run everyone by him, and then by, I don't know, 6 or 8 years in, he, if I said I thought she was great, he would let it go. You know, he wouldn't have to see someone. So that was nice.
Are there people that you look and you think, I really underestimated that person?
Mm-hmm. I think, did I do that? I did. Well, I underestimated Diane Venora and thinking she couldn't play Hamlet. But I kind of think, I mean, there has been more.
Sure.
I auditioned Bette Midler. And I have notes on that. This was when she was in Fiddler, the original Fiddler. And I wrote on it, I laughed afterward, I wrote, she did some Shakespeare for me, and it just didn't cut it. And who knows, she probably can do Shakespeare, but anyway, I didn't think so. I wrote, wonderful personality actress, but not Shakespeare. So I don't know. Maybe I've ruined
You were
her
right. You were right. That's in the Shakespeare 36 play marathon that began in '87.
Yes.
That must have just been really daunting, and what a challenge to be casting those.
Yes.
And what are the ones that give you the most thrill when you look back?
Well, to tell you one of the ones that gave me the most thrill was James Lapine's Winter's Tale, which I
Mandy
loved.
Patinkin
with Mandy and Alfred.
And Alfred Woodard. And that was
Chris
one.
Reeve and Diane Venora, which was, I thought, a stunning piece. And then All's Well That Ends Well, that Richard Jones directed, was not a stunning piece. But, you know, it was very funny. Joe really decided to do this. And I think people say, and maybe it's true, he had been diagnosed with cancer earlier. And I don't know, some people suggest that this was his project and somehow he would live through that. He didn't.
Yeah.
But he lived a long time. And so he literally took names. He took all the people, a lot of the names, because he was taking a big ad in the Times, and he wanted to sell subscriptions for 6 years to Shakespeare. Because the original plan was to do 3 in downtown and 2 in the park, to do 5 Shakespeares a year, which was crazy and never happened. I mean, you can't. On the budget. So he would take names, and then we were ready to get the ad, and I was called into his office, and he said, I need more names. I said, shouldn't we call these people first? Oh, great. And say, you know, he said, we have no time, we have to do it. I said, okay. So I, must have done 15 names, and it was hysterical because...
I mean, was this Cher and Cleopatra, or was that just
No, that
Sky
was later.
Okay.
That was later.
Okay.
These were a list of names of major actors, stars, a lot of them, who would be in these 36 plays. And
whether they knew it or not.
Whether they knew it or not. And I So I was saying, Joe, I think we have no time. Okay, so we gave the names, the ad came out, and do you know that people called me if they weren't on it, and why weren't they on it? I never got a call saying, how could you put my name? And we said they would be in it. We committed them, and no one ever minded. It's great.
And this American Shakespeare is still controversial, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
people want to hear Brits.
I know. I think it's, again, I think it's critic run. I think there's a British training. That's how they first heard it. That's how they always hear it, and they do it differently. But American Shakespeare is as clear, is muscular, is alive, is in the moment. Has still, I mean, there are many training institutions. I teach at one of the best, and they really teach Americans how to deal with the verse. It's a different story than it was in the 70s, when there really was there was very few here, and you had to go to England to learn how to do it. Now you don't, and really for the last 15 years you don't have to do it. I would be the one. Joe wouldn't mind if people had a Brooklyn accent. I didn't love that with Shakespeare.
Gee, I wouldn't want to hear it with a Chicago accent somehow.
Yes, I know.
I think it's the voice in our head, right? Is there a tape in your head that has, if I mention an actor, you think about their whole career? You said that one time, that casting directors have to remember everybody.
I can think of performing. If you mention actors, I certainly used to. Now that I don't do it every day, when you do it every day, I always call myself an idiot savant, because you'd say a name and I'd see a performance in my head. I'd unspool the reel. And I don't do it as much, but I can remember, when you asked me about one of my favorite things, I can remember Winter's Tale, when Diane is as the wife and she comes alive. He sees her, she's a statue, she's supposed to be dead, and she comes alive. And I can remember that moment. I still see that. It was an extraordinary moment.
You also were at the public for the two subsequent administrations.
Yes.
So that you were there with a Joanna Acolyte's tumultuous brief time. And then through a chunk of the George Wolfe time.
Through 8 years of George's 10 or 11 years.
Yeah. And now we're just at this time beginning the fourth artistic administration with Oscar Eustis.
Right.
And I remember going to the public, and when there were just 5 productions going on at the same time, and you just had that feeling
that was the best.
It was the center of the universe.
Center of the universe. It really was the best. And you'd be in the lobby, and you'd see young people, and old people, and black people, and Latino people, and white people, and Chinese people, because there were so many different events and plays happening, and they were inviting in different audiences, which we all hoped that they would switch them, that the Chinese people would not only go to see a David Henry Wong play, but would go to see, which happens somewhat, of course, but it was fabulous then. It was through the 70s that happened, and then, now it's, there's great money issues. It's very hard.
How do you keep five theaters open
and they're small theaters. They can never, even if you sold out plays in the Newman, or not so much the Newman, because that's a big one, but in the Shiva, in Martinson, there are 150 seats. You can never make up the costs of the production. So you need grants, and funding. You need help.
So, is there such a thing as a casting couch?
I think in films. I think in films there was. I mean, I think it was also producers more than casting directors did it, but not in New York. Never heard of it in New York. Never heard of it.
And is this a field then that people are going into? It always seemed like so much fun.
Yeah. I know. That's what we always used to. We would, as we were sitting there and we couldn't cast a role, and I would say, when the play opens, there will be someone on that stage. That was my line about it. People felt encouraged by that. But tell me what you asked again.
Are people going into it?
People going into
women in theater, is this This is
it is a woman's job.
It
you
is.
know why? Because it's a service job. That's why I always thought that.
Yeah.
I always thought, because, you know, you make sure that the director and the playwright are happy. I mean, that's your job, to give them many who really will make them feel that they can make this art happen. And you also, just me, because you know, because the people who are talent are the actors, you treat them with great care and love because you want them to do their best work. So I always think it's why more women are in it than men.
It is kind of a nurturing.
It's a nurturing job.
Which is not a bad thing.
Not at all. No. But you know, women have always had jobs
as long
like
as,
that. As long as, yeah.
There are other things open also.
And you know, and you're making, you know, and you need obviously taste and you need intelligence and all of that. But a lot of it is that, I thought, is the kind of nurturing job. I think women are still going into it. You know, a lot of actors go into it.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
They can't quite, you know, they're not doing well, or they're not making enough of a living. They're hitting 35, and they want children, and they want a life, and...
Yeah, I'm afraid that our time is up, which is ridiculous.
Oh, my goodness.
Rosemarie Tichler, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was a
thank you
pleasure.
for being here. On behalf of the League of Professional Theater Women, I'm Linda Weiner, and this has been Women in Theater.